Living Fountains or Broken Cisterns, Chapter 17, Christian Education Continued. Loving Father, this is the last chapter of this wonderful book. May it make a major difference in our life, in our mind, in our thinking, so that we can become repairer of the breach done in true education over the centuries, even starting in heaven with Lucifer in the most holy place, when he started putting doubts in the mind of the angel, and a third of them followed him through this terrible, terrible mistake, Father, of rejection of your truth. May we be those who will repair and restore the path to dwell in, according to your riches and glory in Christ Jesus. Alleluia. The 19th century has not been lacking in minds which have grasped, at least in part, the principles of Christian education. Thus write Pestalozzi, sound education stands before me symbolized by a tree planted near fertilizing waters. In the newborn child are hidden those faculties which are to unfold during life. The individual and separate organs of his being form themselves gradually in an harmonic whole and build up humanity in the image of God. With this agree Milton's definition of education. The end, then, of learning, he says, is to repair the ruin of our first parents by regaining to know God aright, and out of that knowledge to Him, to imitate Him, to be like Him as we may, the nearest by possessing our souls of true virtue, which, being united to the heavenly grace of faith, makes up the highest perfection. This is similar to the definition given by the author of Christian education, that the true object of education is to restore the image of God in the soul. And that author, of course, is Mrs. Ellen G. White. Christian education, then, is a spiritual education. In this sense, the words of Pestalozzi at the burial of his wife are pathetic but weighty with significance. Turning to the coffin, he said tenderly, "We were shunned and despised by all. Sickness and poverty bowed us down, and we ate dry bread with tears. What was it in those days of several strife gave you and me strength to persevere and not lose hope?" Laying a copy of God's Word on her breast, he continued, "From this source, you and I drew courage and strength and peace." Isn't that beautiful? Advocates of Christian education may today encounter the same sort of rebuff from the world, but God's Word stands as guide, expressing the principles to be followed by the educator. Charles W. Dabney, Jr., president of the University of Tennessee, in an address, gave utterance to these words. The Bible is the best textbooks of education, and as many other sciences. In it we read where Paul tells Timothy, his dearly beloved son in the faith, that all Scripture is given by inspiration of God, and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man of God may be perfect, thoroughly furnished unto all good works. Nowhere in literature or philosophy is there a better or clearer expression of the true purpose of education than this. The object of education is not pleasure or comfort or gain, though all these may and should result from it. The one true purpose in education is to prepare the man for good works. It is a noble thing to develop a perfect soul, to thoroughly furnish a body, mind, and heart. Character building, conscience forming, then, is the main object of education. The teacher dare not neglect character, nor the college to provide for its development. We must always and everywhere, in every course and scheme of study, provide those methods and agencies which shall develop the character of the pupil along with his other powers. How then shall we develop character in our pupils? What are the methods and the agencies for doing this? This is the crucial question of this age, as of every age. To this question all the ages give but one answer, and that is Christianity. The world has had many teachers of science, art, and philosophy, but only one teacher of righteousness, and he was Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Isn't that well put? The only place where you can find true education is to the greatest of the teacher. Other can teach science, art, or philosophy, but only one was a teacher of righteousness, and he was Jesus Christ. The main teachers of science, art, and philosophy have, by their system of education, led men away from the knowledge of God, the wisdom which is eternal life. If the education of Christ is to be accepted as suggested by Professor Dabney, his word, the Bible, must be recognized as the book of books, the guide in all investigation, the interpreter of all phenomena. Much is said concerning the moral education which every child should receive. Parents realize that the boy or girl who grows to maturity with only a physical or intellectual education is either a pugilist or a fit subject for the penitentiary, and hence they insist that the spiritual nature should receive some attention. But where is this spiritual education to be obtained? State schools have no right to give such a training. Indeed, they cannot do it. True, they have attempted it, but it is a miserable failure. Protestants should no longer make the demand. Israel falling, the offer was made to the Christian church. Age by age, that body has refused to live a spiritual life or accepting the proffered gift, has attempted to rise without complying with the necessary conditions, absolute faith in God's word, and strict compliance with his commands. The Reformation again turned men's eye toward a spiritual education, and American Protestant had the best opportunity ever offered man to return to the original design of the Creator. Failure is again the verdict of the recording angel. Time is then on, and the last gospel message is going to the world. But before a people can be prepared for the setting up of Christ's kingdom, they must be educated according to the principles of Christian education. For this is the foundation of all governments as well as of all religion. What is Christian education? Since its object is the training of a human being for life eternal, and that existence is a spiritual life, the spiritual must be predominating feature of the education. When the spiritual leads, the intellectual and physical take their proper positions. The inner or spiritual man feed only upon truth, absolute truth, not theory nor speculation, but truth. Thy word is truth. The Word of God must then be the basis of all Christian education, the science of salvation, the central theme. Since God reveals his character in two ways, in his Word and in his works, the Bible must be the first book in Christian education and the book of nature next. Many educators have seen the value of the book of nature, and today nature study forms a large part of the course of instruction in all grades of schools. It may be asked, if not this, then Christian education? We reply, does it restore in man the image of God? If so, it passes the test. But it cannot be said to do this, and therefore it falls short. Wherein then lies the difficulty in modern nature teaching or the sciences in general? Read some of our modern textbooks in science. They readily reveal the answer. Young's General Astronomy reads section 908, Origin of the Nebular Hypothesis. Now, this, the present condition, is evidently a good arrangement for a planetary system, and therefore some have inferred that the Deity made it so, perfect from the first. But to one who considers the way in which other perfect works of nature usually come to perfection, their processes of growth and development, this explanation seems improbable. it appears far more likely that the planetary system grew than that it was built outright. In its main idea that the solar system once existed as a nebulous mass and has reached its present state as a result of a series of purely physical processes, it seems certain to prove correct, and it forms the foundation of all the current speculation upon the subject. What it's saying here that it's a basic the principle of based on evolution. And that's what they're presenting here. The text was asking earlier, the paragraph was saying, can we, through the textbooks of science today, can we find a development of character? Can we find the truth of the Bible? And here the author is using this particular book, Young General Astronomy, section 908, and the origin of nebular hypothesis. And we know an hypothesis is just a supposition. And what they're supposing here, instead of accepting that God created everything perfect from the first, that theory implies that it took a long time through a nebulous mass for the sun and the moon and the stars and the planets to reach its present state as a result of a series of purely physical processes. Do you believe that? No, this is absolutely not true. This is strictly speculation. Series 909, Laplace theory. He supposed that this is the gentleman, Laplace theory, he supposed that at some past time, which may be taken as a starting point of our system history, the matter collected in the sun and planet was in the form of a nebula, again a famous nebula. This nebula was a cloud of intensely heated gas, perhaps hotter, as he supposed, than the sun is now. This nebula, that's his third part of the theory, under the action of its own gravitation, assumed an approximately globular form with a rotation around its axis, etc., etc. So here is the false teaching again of the creation of the suns and planets, and now all the planets gravitate around the sun and they rotate upon themselves. And it comes to nothing. Basically, the theory is based on the fact that that nebula, under an action of its own gravitation, assume an approximately globular form with the rotation around its axis, meaning like the sun, the moon, the star, the earth, anything that has a globular form, like a globe, like the earth, that has come over times with its own gravitation. Is it not ridiculous? Then the student must decide whether he will base his study of the earthens and the earth, the study of astronomy, geography, arid geology, as well as zoology and botany indirectly on this hypothesis, which we are told forms the foundation of all current speculations upon the subject. Can you imagine? That's paganism. Just like the earth is flat, that comes way back from the pagans. The people time as actually accepted in its time, in its days, but now they have the audacity to claim that they have an observatory, and they even have a telescope that is called Lucifer. If you don't believe it, you check it out. Today, in 2021, do your research. That's the Catholic Church. That's their teaching today. So here we have, these are based on speculation upon the subject, or whether he will turn from these, the student, reasonable explanation for the existence of things, and take the plain word of truth, which says, by the word of the Lord were the heavens made. He spake, and it was. He commanded, and it stood fast, together with the explanation as given in Genesis and elsewhere in the scriptures. So this is where we come from with this video prepared from this book, and demonstrating the whole chapter 1 of Revelation, and chapter 2 has been done too in one of our research, that demonstrate without a shadow of a doubt that God, by the word of his mouth, created all things. Faith and finite reason face each other. The education of the world takes reason. Christian education is based upon faith in God's word, which will develop character. Why is it that modern science study does not lead to God? In the evolutionary teaching of the nebular hypothesis, you have one answer. Because it does not reach God. It says it comes from, all of a sudden, there was a nebular And, it develops into the sun, the moon, and the stars over time. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Picking up an ordinary textbook in zoology, we read, the earliest member of the series directly leading up to the horses was Eopus, an older Eocene form about as large as a fox. This is the origin of the horse now. And I can't even pronounce those Latin words, Eopus and Eocene. I can't even be bothered. Which had 4 well-developed toes and the rudiment of a 5th one each 4 foot, and 3 toes behind. In later Eocene beds appeared an animal of similar size but with only 4 toes in front and 3 behind. In newer beds, lower Miocene, are found the remains of Mesohippus, which was as large as a sheep and had 3 toes and the splint of another in each 4 foot. The succeeding forms were still more horse-like. Next, they find a donkey-like animal, and later a true equus as large as the existing horse appeared just above the horizon, and the series is complete. Can you imagine learning this in school, in science? How ridiculous is that? If the horse tribe has evolved from a fox-like animal, it is little wonder that men trace their origin to the monkey tribe. But those who wish God's character take by faith the statement that the image of God created in him. And when people start arguing with you that we come from the monkeys, just tell them, that's okay. Your father is a monkey. Mine is the creator of heaven and earth. Just don't argue with them. Just tell them, sure. So your dad is a monkey and mine is the creator of heaven and earth. Such a theories form the basis for the generally adopted classification of the entire vegetable and animal worlds, and many classes today, they still teach this ridiculous conception. Christian education demands new textbooks based upon the truth of God's Word. From Dana, the recognized authority on geology, the following sentences are quoted. Life commenced among plants and seaweeds, and it ended in palms, oaks, elms, the orange, rose. It commenced among animals in languilla or mollusks standing on a stem like a plant. Can you imagine? Crinoids, worms, tribolites, and probably earlier in the simple systemless protozoans. And it ended in man. For this development, he says, time is long. It's the same principle as the flood. The evolutionist says what created the Grand Canyon in Arizona, which is an important structure in nature, and they analyzed it for centuries, and now they have come to the conclusion, the evolutionists, that it took a lot of time with a little bit of water at a time. Erosion created that. Where the creationists, according to the Word of God, chapter 7 and 8 of Genesis, can say it took a lot of water in a short time to create that big canyon. And that's exactly evolution against creation. A little bit of water with a lot of time, you can get the Grand Canyon. Where the creationist proposes, according to the Word of God, it's not even a proposal, it's the truth. A lot of water came down in 40 days, and there you have the Grand Canyon. Does not make sense? At least you have the Bible to back you up. Where a little water over millions of years, nobody is there to watch it. 40 days, that's what is reported. That's what Noah and his family saw. The rain came down, and it rained for 40 days. And after 40 days, it started to recess, but it took a year for him to get out with his family from the ark. Read chapter 7 and 8 of Genesis, and right there, you're going to be already sure that creation stands on 2 feet, not like these crinoids and worms and tribolites. This is absolutely ridiculous. In a paragraph on progress, always to gradual unfolding of a system, are the words, there were higher and lower species appearing through all the ages, but the successive population were still in their general range of higher and higher grade, and thus the progress was ever upward. The type or plant of vegetation and the 4 grand types of plants or plants of animal life the radiate, molluscan, articulate, vertebrate were each displayed under a multitude of tribes and species, rising in rank with the progress of time. So this took a long time before we can get a horse, a lion, a monkey, flowers, and plant and species. And yet, the Word of God says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then He proceeded in creating moon, the sun, the stars, and He proceeded in creating the trees and the fruits, and then at last we know that on the sixth day He created the animals and the creeping things, and then He created Adam and Eve, the first human. In the study of this evolution in animal life, you see, this is a progress which should be, as zoological history attests, a development, an unfolding, an evolution. And in the study of this evolution in animal life, he says, the progress in the system of life is a progress in cephalization. And he gives several illustrations as the passage from tadpole to frog, from lobster to crab, from worm to insect. Such a teacher speaks always of the evolution from the lower to the higher forms of life, but leave retrogression entirely out of their reckoning. To those who offer the secret record in opposition to this so-called geological proof, Dana says the biblical student finds in the first chapter of Genesis positive statement with regard to the creation of living beings, but these statements are often misunderstood, for they really leave the question as to the operation of natural causes for the most part an open one, as asserted by Augustine among the fathers of the Church, and by some biblical interpreter of the present day. And yet, it says, it does not leave any question on the operation of natural causes. It says, the first day, the second day, the third day, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. If they only wanted to believe, they wouldn't create such a big questionnaire of as to, and then they would understand better what Christ, the way He has done the creation, because He's willing to share it with us. In view of the whole subject, the following appears to be the conclusion most likely to be sustained by further research. The evolution of the system of life went forward through derivation of species from species, according to usual methods not yet clearly understood, and with few occasion for supernatural intervention. How deep is that? And when you read actually the theory of Darwin, which is based on old evolution, pagan evolution, there are so many maybes and so many it could be and so many suppositions that you can see that these are only theories, and theories that do not even stand on 1 foot, never mind 2 feet. Thus have the truth in God's great lesson book of nature been misinterpreted. It was a step in the right direction when the mechanical drill of the classic was dropped and nature study substituted. But God's word must take its place as the interpreter of nature and natural phenomena, or the theory of evolution is the natural result, and this will form no part of Christian education. Protestant parents, are your children learning to see in the visible things about them the emblems of the invisible, even the eternal power and Godhead? If not, why do you not put them where they will? This is their salvation. The exaltation of detail and the belittling of principles is a common error in educational system. This is seen in all departments of learning. Not only is it exemplified in the exaltation of the mental and the physical above the spiritual, but the same method is employed in the detailed work of the classroom. This is, in essence, papal education. Christian education requires teacher to ever see the border throughout the whole course of instruction. To illustrate the thought, there are a few fundamental principles which govern the universe, which we call the universal laws. Such is the statement of the truth. The love of Christ constrained us, which contain within it the whole explanation of the force of gravity, adhesion, cohesion, molecular attraction, chemical affinity, human love, the law of sex, and is therefore illustrated in physics, chemistry, mineralogy, biology. in fact, in all the sciences. Again, the second great commandment, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself, is the statement of a principle which underlies all history, civil government, political and social science. If followed, it will solve all international difficulties as well as prevent personal animosity. It will blot out the evils of society, breaking down the barrier between poverty and riches. Trust will never exist. Trade union will be unnecessary and monopolies unknown if the one law of Jehovah were only learned. Of how much greater value, then, is the study of such a principle than all the theories which may be proposed by men for international arbitration, or all the laws which may be passed in legislative halls concerning the equal rights of man and the proper means of governing states, territories, or acquired possession. But this is Christian education, and lessons as this are learned only when the truth is written on the heart by the pen of the Spirit. It is thus that a spiritual education, the higher birth of which the Savior spoke, rises above the education of the world as far as heaven is above the earth. An interesting parenthesis here would be again the visitation of Nicodemus by night with Christ in John chapter 3. Nicodemus could perceive that Christ had a different education. He could not pinpoint it, and he showed his ignorance when he started asking questions. And Christ, in a way, rebuked him when he said, art thou not a teacher in Israel and do not know those things? And if you read this encounter in the book Desire of Ages, you will see what Mrs. White has to say about this. It's quite interesting. Christ absolutely shows Nicodemus his ignorance in kindness, but in a kind of a correctional way, which shows Nicodemus that he better change his way of teaching because he was not into true Christian education. When these and kindred principles are made the central thought, all the fact, and here it says, it is thus that a spiritual education, the higher birth of which the Savior spoke, rises above the education of the world as far as heaven is above the earth. When these and kindred principles or universal laws are made the central thought, all the facts which the pupil may be able to learn in a lifetime will but serve to impress the truth more firmly on his life. All the facts which it is possible for men to gather in a lifetime, added to all that are gathered by generation after generation, are but illustration of a few principles. Modern teaching deals almost wholly with facts. It requires children from the time they enter school until they are graduated to heap together facts. Process is the great theme in mathematics. Facts are the things sought for in the whole realm of natural science. So you need to bring evidence, facts, just that. That's what they ask you all the time. You don't have to believe, you have to prove. Prove. History is but the study of still more facts, and where generalization or classifications are made, they are theories formulated from the facts gathered. But man is never able to collect all the facts. He is never sure that his conclusions have reached absolute truth. The truth of the matter is, the classifications thus formed are only partially correct, and the discovery of a few more facts overthrows the fine-spun theories of the best of scientists. So there you go. There is not a completeness when you only look for facts. It is thus constantly in astronomy, in botany, zoology, and in biology. Because of new discoveries, the physician of yesterday is wholly wrong in the eyes of the physician of today. Tomorrow, the bright light of today will be superseded by some other luminary. This is the result of inductive reasoning based on sense perception. This thought is well expressed by Hinsdale, who says, we observe and register phenomena, classify facts, deduce conclusions and laws, and build up systems. But in science and philosophy, we return to the subject again and again. We seek to verify our facts and test our conclusions, and when we have finished, we're not sure, save in a limited sphere of our result. Some of the best-known sciences have been largely reorganized within the last few years. We have the new chemistry, the new astronomy, the new political economy, and even the new mathematics, particularly in the field of human conduct where man's will is the governing faculty. We are often uncertain of our way and sometimes are wholly lost. The shifting foundation upon which such by the knowledge rests is well illustrated, which tests the human being is able to make with the organs of sense. Water of 98% is hot to the hand. If it is at 98%, this is, I should say degrees, sorry, 98 degrees, which is Fahrenheit, is hot in the hand that has been accustomed to a temperature of 45 degrees, but cool to the hand, which is just taken from water of 112 degrees. An orange is sweet to the man who has been eating a stronger acid, but sour to the palate accustomed to sugar. The eye, which has been used in a dimly lighted room, is dazzled by the noonday glare, and judging of the size of a star by sight, we would not conceive it to be a sun. The knowledge gained by the senses is only partially true. It is not absolute truth, and the scientific theories propounded by minds which have reasoned from these inaccurate data cannot fail to fall short of absolute truth. It may be knowledge, it is not wisdom. An example comes to mind: the calendar. The Gregorian calendar is totally based on theory, and you cannot back it up when you look at a lunisolar calendar, for example, because if you look at the solar calendar alone, after so many years, it runs out with the cycle, between the cycle of the sun and the moon. And that is perfectly showing here this example that if you go by the senses only, you will not be able to look at this calendar that we're using now since 1500. And this calendar now does not fit in season with the moon, because the moon is the one that has been appointed for season according to the psalm. And now we know the Gregorian calendar is off season. It has been off season for many, many decades. They actually wanted to change it in the 1920s, and it didn't happen. It has been running out between the cycle of the sun and the moon completely in different space. Just like in the 1500, it was out by 11 days. Now it's much more than that. So we're not even getting the right season. We're not even getting the right timing. And we think this is an accurate calendar. And I won't go into Saturday. Christian education approaches nature from the opposite direction. With a mind open to receive truth, it grasps by faith the statement of a universal principle or universal law. And the spiritual law is the thing sought, and the corresponding physical law is compared with it. Just like the same author says that God enunciates the universal law and illustrates them with the law of nature and the invisible things that can explain those things. And it's a wonderful, wonderful approach when you discover that. It's very easy. That's why when I prepared that study on Genesis 1, and I have done Genesis 2 now, using the principle, as a scientist, I have been taught the other way, but now using still the knowledge of how to analyze things, it's so simple. You find the universal law first, and you illustrate it with an applied science. It's very simple. And then if you have not studied the applied science, well, that gives you an opportunity to study it. You don't have to become a genius at it and know everything about it, but at least it can give you a basis in chemistry or physics or mathematics or anatomy, physiology, pathology. There are over 600 applied science now. So we have a lot of work, a lot of time in eternity to study it, but we must apply it ourselves now to understand the way to study it properly. So Christian education approaches nature from the opposite direction. So in a way, we could say Christian education approaches sciences completely the other way. Instead of trying to find facts or evidences, we have already established fundamental and universal laws that we can follow, and then we simply illustrate them with the applied sciences. With a mind open to receive truth, it grasps by faith the statement of a universal principle. This is not as difficult as you think. It's quite simple, actually. The spiritual law is the thing sought, and the corresponding physical law is compared with it. Once found, every fact which is learned, every observation made, but shows more clearly the working of that law in the spiritual world. For such a teaching, faith is an indispensable attribute. Experiment is not discouraged, but strongly encouraged. Reason is not laid aside, but the mind is called upon to reason on subjects grander and nobler than any deductions which can possibly result from the opposite manner of approaching truth. Just like the principle of chemistry. And once you learn it from the Bible, it's so simple because it talks about in chemistry, you find chemistry in the Bible. And once you start learning water, for example, the molecule of water, and you learn it from the reverse of what you have learned in chemistry, makes it so beautiful. And it starts with the atom, and it starts with the nucleus, and you can find the electron and the proton and the neutron, and it reveals to you how God created all things. So it's not bad to have the knowledge, but when you look at it from the point of view of God, then you say, wow, he's so brilliant. The more I study science, I love science, all of the science. I love taking time to study sciences. And it's like a discovery. It's like, wow, that's what it says here. Subjects grander and nobler than any deduction which can possibly result from the opposite manner of approaching truth. This makes you discover the mind of your Creator. This is what God was attempting to do with Job, asking him all those questions. And Job could not answer them because because of sin, because he came after Genesis 3. He may not have been instructed on how to understand these wonderful truths. But once you have the true education and you recognize you need to understand the universal laws, the principles that kind of brings it together, like gravitation, and then you have oxidation in chemistry. You have all kind of different methods to learn in chemistry, but it all stems from the same Creator. And that's what makes it so beautiful. This is the ideal in Christian education, the point towards which the Christian teacher is leading his pupil. In case of unbelief or in dealing with the heathen, the mind must first be approached through the avenues of the senses until the Spirit of God arouses the inner eye of faith. And that's what Elder Sutherland talks about when he presents the way the Lord instructed Adam and Eve and the angel before and after sin. And this is explained in that beautiful study. And this is why we need to learn those things. So with the pagan, you can start with explaining to them the mind must first be approached to the avenues of the senses until the Spirit of God arouses the inner eye of faith. So basically, but you don't reverse it. You can still quote from the Word of God. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. But how did He do it? Well, then you can go into the principle of the first day, second day, third day, like explanation of the light, for example, and the frequencies and anything to do with physics and mathematics and astrophysics. It's absolutely beautiful to look at this because then you're looking at the way God created all these things. Rather than to prove them, you just have to look at that science and say, oh, that's how He did it. This is all what I've learned from science, is to learn how God created things. It's wonderful. And how they proceed. Like matter is the creation of the atoms. And then when you study physics, you study how that matter is basically functioning. So first is the structure and then is the function, just like anatomy and physiology of the body. So chemistry is really the anatomy of matter, and physics is really the physiology, which is how it functions. Children are not given credit for having the faith they really do possess, and are therefore held to the inductive method by educators long after their minds and hearts are capable of grasping truth, and when it would be found that the deductive method would produce a much more rapid growth of mental and spiritual power than is now seen. And that's what Generation 144K is demonstrating. You can take a child, they have the capacity, that's why he says there that children are not given credit for having the faith they really do possess. And that's why it's easier to teach children and adults, because their minds and hearts are capable of grasping truth. And if the educator do not do the proper inductive method, if they don't teach them properly according to the true method of education, it's very difficult to reverse back when you're an adult. Very difficult. This subject, the qualifications necessary on the part of a teacher, this subjects, you have to learn how to qualify these things and how to learn them as a teacher first before you can present them to your pupil. So that's why the teacher needs to be qualified to do that. Remembering that this education is of spiritual nature, the teacher himself must be connected with truth by an unwavering faith. When Nicodemus, the representative of the higher education in the schools of Jerusalem, interviewed Christ, the new teacher who had appeared in their midst, and whose teaching was attended by a power unknown to the educators of the day, the learned man says, "Rabbi, we know thou art a teacher, son of God, but how can these things be?" The heavenly teacher outlined to him the secret of his educational system, telling Nicodemus that it was not based on sight, but on faith. That the spiritual was first, and when so made, the rest would follow. Then came the query, how can it be? To which Christ replied, if I had told you earthly things, and you believe it not, how shall you believe if I tell you of heavenly things? Art thou a master in Israel, and know not these things? In view of these thoughts, it is not strange that the study of the sciences in a Christian school will differ widely from the course offered in the same department of learning in an institution where the object of education is wholly different. And that's why when you watch those videos with those two young girls on Generation 144K, one is 4 and one is 7. Now they're 5 and 8. But last year they were 4 and 7 when we did those practice run, you could say, because I myself had just learned the true method of education, especially applied to children, as far as how to teach science to them. And because I had read this book more than once, I think it was an experiment on my part, but I was able to demonstrate that children, they can learn chemistry, they are learning the periodic table, they are learning the element of the body, they have learned the nomenclature of chemistry, the elements. They're learning also the principles in physics like gravity and speed and energy and mass. They can learn all this. Do they remember all? That's not important. We're teaching them the principles. We're not teaching them to memorize. We're teaching them the principles so that after a while, they can see in their mind how it functions, and we do also experiment with them, showing them in reality how to do it. Something as simple as boiling water. This is something as a child always used to fascinate me. And when I went into chemistry, I was able now to see the molecule of water. I was able to see the stage of water. The state of water is you can have the liquid, the vapor, and then of course it becomes into a gas, and then you can freeze it. So there are different states of water, which is very unique. Only water is capable of changing state like this. And as a child, I was fascinated by just boiling water. I used to boil water all the time, and people probably would have laughed at me to know that to this day, when I boil water, I love to see it boiling and see all those molecules. And all of a sudden they change into vapor, which is a gas, and I know the state of the water. That should be the first lesson of chemistry to a kid, and he will never forget. H2O. It's so simple. and learn the formula 2H2 plus O2 equal to H2O. The formula of water is not H2O. It's 2 atoms of hydrogen plus 1 atom of oxygen will give you a molecule of 2 molecules of water. 2H2 plus 2O equal to H2O. So this is really the formula. So in view of those thoughts, is it not strange that the study of the sciences in a Christian school, it is not strange actually, that it should differ widely from the course offered in the same department of learning in an institution where the object of education is wholly different. So discarding the evolutionary theory which pervades the teaching of all institutions where education is not wholly based on the Word of God, man created in the image of God is recognized as the highest manifestation of creative power. Contrary to evolution, we do not come from monkeys. We were created almost equal to angels. So we do not start as a monkey starting on 4 and then we all of a sudden stand up and our face and features changes and up you have a human. That's not the way it works at all. God did not do that at all. The life of God is the first study, that life as manifested in man is the next, and physiology takes its place as the center of all science study. Why? Because when you study physiology, you see miracles after miracles. Like if you study the ear or the eyes or any of the organ, that cannot have come as a blob or a nebula. It had to be coming from a high level of a mind that is so brilliant and intelligent to put that together. And so the study of life in all its manifestation, beginning with the spiritual and extending to the mental and physical. And here, as elsewhere, the laws which govern the spiritual nature have their types in the other two natures. And when once the central truth of life and abundance of life is grasped, the study of physiology becomes not the study of dead forms where mere facts are studied, but a soul study, which include the home of the inner man and all the machinery which the soul manipulates. And we're talking here the mind itself and the brain, which is the casket for the mind. Thus considered from this center, physiology extend rays like the spokes of a wheel, each representing another science, until within that broad circle represented by these radius are included all the physical as well as all the metaphysical sciences. And if you look at the video carefully, I do have a page that shows that presentation, because when I read this, I created it with a circle, putting physiology in the middle, and then all the spokes of the wheel shows other sciences that you can learn as a human being, like chemistry and physics and mathematics and astronomy, etc., etc. There are over 600 applied science in the world today that have been discovered. I'm sure there are more, though. It will be seen that this mode of correlating the sciences cures at once the mistake of the age, the cramming system, which result from a neglect of manual training and from the study of a multiplicities of books crowded with facts which must be stored in the mind of the student. And so that's why when you teach chemistry, most people do not like chemistry because they have not had good teacher. I'm really sure of that. People who do not understand science cannot teach science. And now, if you have teachers that understand it from the spiritual to the physical by using the Bible, it's extraordinary. So by placing, we have here with the explanation, physiology at the center of the circle, correlating there with all the science. Another advantage arises for that circle includes within itself the languages and mathematics. These latter are but helps in the study of the thought-bearing subjects, the Bible and the sciences, and instead of being studied as primary subject, should be used as a means to an end, which means that instead of studying the sciences as a primary subject, okay, now you're going to study chemistry, you're going to study physics, mathematics. No, these sciences now are used to demonstrate, for me anyway, my interpretation of sciences now is to show how vast is the mind of the Creator. We can never attain it. And for Lucifer to have pretended, I think he was schizophrenic. He became schizophrenic in his brain. Something must have switched from reality to fiction. That's what schizophrenia is. And he became schizophrenic, thinking he could sit on the throne of God and now rule as God the universe, which he never created, which not all the science was given to him anyway. It's crazy just to think about it, that he thought that he could actually rule the world, the whole world that God had created, and get rid of God. It's incredible. But we do that in our life when we sin against God too. We get rid of him. So therefore, reading, writing, spelling, grammar, rhetoric, literature, mathematics, and from arithmetics to general geometry and calculus are but means of expressing truth gained in the study of the revealed Word of God and the book of nature. All of these sciences, if you have ever studied them, they're a means in by themselves. They are not the main points. That's what it says there. They should be used as a means to an end. They are not primary subjects. They are means to an end to reveal the Word and the book of nature and the beauty and the immensity and the infinity of the mind of our Creator. The simplicity of the system will appeal to the mind of any educator, for it is a plan long sought for. The one thing lacking among those who have experimented with such a method has been the central subject, God's Word. Having truth as the basis for the correlation, the problem, so far as methods are concerned, is practically solved. And I can guarantee you, 144,000 teachers, the teachers of righteousness, like Abraham was called a teacher of righteousness, Christ was a teacher of righteousness as well. These people that are formed in the image of God, the 144,000 teachers, will go out in the very last time of earth history, which is now. And if we are committed to use this method, the Lord will impregnate it in our mind. And whenever we present something, we will always use the Word of God to demonstrate the sciences. And this is what the first verse has inspired me in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. God created is a divine action. When we look at the beginning, we know that this is time. Heaven is space and earth is matter. Time, the science of time is astronomy. The science of space is astrophysics or physics. And the science of matter is chemistry. And out of those sciences, we have astronomy, we have astrophysics and chemistry. We need mathematics in order to apply those sciences. And so here you have beginning, you have space, and you have matter. You have astronomy, you have astrophysics and chemistry, and then you have mathematics. So basically, out of this, you have beginning, heaven and earth. So you have 10 beautiful universal laws in 10 words of the first verse of Genesis chapter 1 and the first verse of the Bible. 10 words in English. Doesn't work quite the same in French. There's a bit more words, but the principles are still there. And 10 words in English from the King James Version that contains actually one divine action God created, and the rest is all having to do with universal laws. This is what's so wonderful. It's so simple. So here we have it again. The simplicity of the system will appeal to the mind of any educator, for it is a plan long sought for. And what is the secret of it? Its central subject is God's Word. So the one thing lacking among those who have experimented with such a method has been the central subject, God's Word. If you reject God's Word and you go back to the old way of teaching, you're back to the pagan way of teaching. Having truth as the basis for the correlation, the problem, so far as the methods are concerned, is practically solved. The great and pressing need is for teacher who can execute the plan. No narrow mind will be equal to the task. Again, as a system, the true education is approached. It's seen the exalted position to which those who teach are called. Before passing the subject of physiology, it is well to consider the meaning of the expression that this subject should be the basis of every educational effort. Textbook study of physiology, it is clear, cannot cover this requirement. The fact is that book study is but a small part of Christian education. True education is life. Any who learns much must live much. The food eaten, the matter of clothing, the body, the study, exercise, mental habits, physical habits, manual training, in fact, every phase of life is a part of the study of physiology and hygiene, and these subjects must one and all receive due consideration by the Christian educator. Why? Because if you do not have any knowledge of your body, that's what it says here, which is physiology, you will mistreat your body through bad mental habit, bad physical habits, bad manual training. You're going to hurt your back. You're going to hurt everything. And if you're hurting, I can guarantee you your brain and your mind is not they're not functioning well. And of course, this has to do also with hygiene. Hygiene is very important. If you do not keep your body clean, if you do not eat anything that is proper for your body, don't expect a great mind. Don't, because your mind will be affected by all that. Manual training is becoming popular in many of our city schools, but the work offered in a Christian school will differ from that of a worldly school in this. The latter is training the hand or the eye only. The former is building character by giving a trade that enables the student to be self-supporting and independent. So this is the purpose of 144,000 teachers. There is nothing better in life than to become independent and self-supporting, like the Apostle Paul and all the Jewish children were taught to do. You don't want to depend on people or even on employers to give you your paycheck every week. You want to be able to do this based on the principle of the Bible. And this is why we have failed miserably in our school and even in our education, because we do not teach children to become self-supporting and independent. I must thank my family, because we were a big family, and at 12 years old, most of us, we had to have a job. And it was basically working either as babysittings, or my brothers would work into, they had some bakery places and chocolate places where my brother, not the girls, but the boys would go to work with the monk, and they would learn a trade. That's what they learned. Maybe that's why I have two brothers who are chefs in my family. But they will learn a trade. And to be self-supporting and independent is very important. If you don't know what to do with your two hands, if you don't know agriculture or anything to do with your two hands, you better start learning. Massage therapy or something that will help you to provide for your needs, and you can charge money for your services. And at the end of time, when we're going to be the renegades, and they're talking about us now, people who do not want to receive the vaccine, we're going to be made the scum of the earth, and it's going to fall into every area of our life. And if we are able to help people with our hands, we're going to exchange produce. It's not going to have to do with money, because we won't have any money, but they will give us what we need because they will appreciate our service. There will still be people who will appreciate what we do. If they're backache and we know how to do a treatment, or if they're, they do not know how to do their gardens and it's not producing, and you come and you're intelligent and you can provide for them, they will help you. And that is becoming self-supporting and independent. And this is the aims. In that, the aims are different. The method must differ, although the matter taught may, in many cases, be identical. So that's the purpose of Christian school. Healthful living is receiving attention in many schools. The Christian school, while teaching the same subject, will have as its object a preparation for eternal life. So it's not just for now. We have some gymnasium here in Canada, or health center, they call them. You go there and do some in the gym. And yet it's fit for life for now, where we are to be fit for Christ for eternity. That's the difference. That's why the fit man of Leviticus we have it in chapter 16, this fit man, and in chapter 23 of Leviticus, where that fit man was prepared to bring the scapegoat in the wilderness. And he was a man of the congregation. He was not a priest. And the Bible is very clear about that. It's a fit man of the congregation. When he comes back, he goes to the camp and wash in the camp. And that fit man is actually the real fit man that the Lord is looking for, not fit to do competition or Olympics. It's fit for Christ. And this is going to be a big subject more and more as we approach the end. Are you fit for Christ physically, mentally, spiritually? Or are you going to give up and be sick and not be able to finish this work? The subject, taught without faith, will bring only increased physical and mental activities. The spiritual nature can be reached alone by that education which is based on faith and on the Word of God. Simply a casual investigation of the subject of Christian education reveals the need of books for the guidance of teachers who undertake to direct the growth of the child. With proper study books based upon the eternal principles of truth revealed in the scriptures, the work, which is now in its infancy, will make much more rapid and substantial progress. And now with digital, we don't always publish the books. People have told me I should publish all my writing, but it's easier now. Maybe if you want to publish them, I don't have any copyrights, right, on them. Go for it, as long as you don't change anything, because you're going to make some mathematical errors and then I will look the fool. But just like the study of astronomy, these books are important. These research are very, very important. And if people ask if we have any books regarding astronomy, regarding chemistry, regarding physics, more and more I'm preparing these studies, and they're very serious. And even if there are little children in the study, these studies are actually valuable too, because we're teaching principles. And it's not to put adult to shame. That generation 144K, we have so many videos for those children. If you take time to listen the way it is being taught to those children and how they understand it at the age of 4 and 7 years old, I can guarantee you it puts us to shame as adults. That's not the purpose. It's not to put you to shame, but it's to make you see that if you say it's too hard and you cannot understand it, if a kid at 4 years old can understand it, well, you're in deep trouble. And it being taught with the principle of true education, because we always use the Bible. Parents who sense the responsibility resting upon them in the rearing of children for the kingdom of heaven are anxious to know when and where the principle of Christian education can be carried out. The beauty of the system is nowhere more vividly portrayed than in the recognition which it gives to the home and the duty of parents towards their children in the matter of education. That's why the Israelites at first were educated at home. They didn't go to the school of the prophets. There were none. The parents were supposed to be the teacher and the educator. In spite of the fact that much is said relative to the importance of educating for the state, the words of Herbert Spencer give a clear idea of the home as the center of true system. He says, as the family comes before the state in order of time, as the bringing up of children is possible before the state exists or when it had ceased to exist or to be, whereas the state is rendered possible only by the bringing up of children, it follows that the duties of the parents demand closer attention than those of the citizen. So the state will create citizen, but Christian education creates member of the kingdom of God. So that's what it's trying to present here. The state will do education to your children to prepare them as good citizens, hopefully if it's good education. But it is not meeting the plan of true Christian education. It goes a little further in recognizing the earthly family as a type of the heavenly. The state does not recognize that. And socialist state is even worse because it removes the children from the parents. It breaks the family. It takes away the grandparents. Grandparents are put in residence with all the other grandparents, and now they cannot share with the next generation their knowledge. It's horrible. God forbid that you end up in an old home place. To put all the old people together is socialist. In the old days, the grandparents stayed in the house with the children, with the grandchildren, and they were passing their knowledge. And that's why when people think I'm old at 72 to pass my knowledge, don't try to stop me. Only the Lord can stop me, not you. We need to pass that knowledge. We have gone to school too, the school of life, beside going to college and university. And this is basically what we're passing on. And even parents who have never gone further than grade 7, in my days that happened. My parents did not go to school as long as I did. They still had a lot to teach us, a lot. And so that's why education is very important. And I was educated a Christian, and it's because of my parents. I was not educated a pagan. The plan of Christian education goes a little further, and recognizing the earthly family as a type of the heavenly places the parents in God's place to the young children. This is from Mrs. White. She says that. Hence, the home should be the only school, and the parents should be the only teachers of their children until they have reached 8 or 10 years of age. Now you may say, but what about Generation 144K? Well, this is a homeschooling program with what we call tutors. The parents themselves are involved too, because we give them some work to look into at home with the children, but mainly practicing things and teaching the children to cook and teaching the children to do chores in the house. They live there, they should learn to clean up their room. Even 5 years old, 4 years old. You can teach children to pick up their toys very, very young. The mother should find time to cultivate in herself and in her children a love for the beautiful buds and opening flowers. The only schoolroom for children from 8 to 10 years of age should be in the open air, amid the opening flowers and nature's beautiful scenery, and their only textbook should be the treasures of nature. And that is from the writing of Mrs. White. It does not necessarily mean that the children should then be taught the Bible and the principle of true education. Don't mix that context. If you read Child Guidance, Mrs. White in the Book of Education, she talks a lot about that. So some parents think that the children shouldn't learn how to read and write and calculate and add and subtract until they're 8 to 10 years old. That's not what Mrs. White implies. Children can learn really fast to read and write, and they love it. They love just picking up the Bible and read it for themselves. I have seen kids at 4 years old reading Steps to Christ and the Bible. And it's amazing to see. It's beautiful to see. It makes them grow, and they're really smart and intelligent. And it's not that they're genius. They have just been taught. And they can sing well, and they have definitely a different mind than children that are just playing with their toys all the time. Toys are not the best educational system unless you put some education into it. So it's very, very beautiful what it says here. And their only textbook should be the treasures of nature, with the Bible, of course, but not textbooks man-made where people are cramming those learning in the mind of the kids. With such a training, the first 10 years, the child should develop a strong body and a strong mind. He should then be able to spend the next 5 or 6 years under the instruction of a consecrated Christian teacher in an elementary school where teachers and parents may cooperate. The threefold nature must be developed so that when the age of manhood or womanhood is reached, strength of character has also been gained. The youth should then continue his mental culture in some industrial school located in the country, where there is freedom from the evils of city life, and where the rapidly developing physical nature can be correctly guided into lines of practical duties which will fit him for real life. In the meantime, mental culture and spiritual training are continued, for character is being formed for eternity. So here the proposal is for children, after they have learned from nature and learned the principle of the Bible, and they can read and write, most of them, and calculate. It's not that hard to teach a child that. You can do it with strawberry and blueberries in the garden, and they learn very fast to pick up 12 apples in the tree. They can learn to calculate. They love it. So here we have the mental culture, the spiritual training that continues, for character is being formed for eternity. The young man or woman of 20 or 22 should be prepared to select a life work, and the special training needed can be received in a training school, which in Christian education will be for Christian workers. Such a school will be necessary for the education thus outlined, extending from infancy over 20 years, cannot fail to develop a character which chooses Christian work as the life occupation. So you can have a trade, but within that trade, even if it's printing or even if it's publishing or even if it's cooking, whenever you do something, it's always along with Christian work, like education. You open up a restaurant, you do some recipe, you teach them to the people so that they can learn to be healthy. But in the meantime, don't make big restaurant with like 200 meals a day. That to me, I've had quite a bit of experience in restaurant. I have done it once or twice that it was too big for my taste, and I shrank it down to maybe like 30 people a day that I'm going to feed. I don't care. I'm not there necessarily to feed a crowd, but that allows me to witness to those people. And when they go home, they either take a piece of literature with them, and they love coming back because we can talk more about God, and if they want to learn something about true education, I will teach them as well. It's a beautiful outlet, a beautiful venue to reach out to people, and of course, it's part of a health center program. You don't just open up a restaurant, you have to have always the health part attached with it, the health center, and you have to have enough room to do Bible study like we have at the little centers and in Lusaka, and you can work with that. It's beautiful. A short training in a higher institution, which in character is a school of the prophets, should so round out the nature already forming that the young person goes out an ambassador for Christ, willing to be used in any capacity by the commander of the heavenly hosts, whether it be on the farm, at the carpenter's bench, or in the pulpit. For his soul is knit to the King of heaven, as was David's to Jonathan's. Such a student is prepared for active service, either on earth or in the kingdom of our God, for he is one with the Father and his Son. And don't think that this will not continue on the earth made new. This is just a preparation. So when people complain, oh, I've been doing this for 40 years, well, you know what? Get ready, get set. We're going to do this for eternity. That's a long time. Communists divided the first 24 years of life into 4 periods, to each of which he would assign a special school. Thus, number 1, the infancy. This is the school, should be the mother's knee. Number 2, for childhood, the school should be the vernacular school. Number 3, for boyhood, the Latin school or gymnasium. Number 4, for youth, the university and travel. So they are pretty stuck on the Latin school, so don't let that hurt you or discourage you. We don't talk like that anymore. We're more into the English school, you could say, or this is basically meaning the secondary school. A mother should exist in every house, a vernacular school in every hamlet and village, a gymnasium in every city, and a university in every kingdom or in every province. The mother, which is the infancy here, the mother and the vernacular school embrace all the young of both sexes, these two here. The mother and the vernacular school embrace all the young of both sexes. The secondary school gives a more thorough education to those who aspire higher than the workshop, while the university trains up to the teacher and the learned man of the future, that our churches, schools, and states may never lack suitable leaders. But it has to be a true education university, because if you go there, you're going to waste your time. If it's a public university, don't even touch it. I can guarantee you that. Colleges, technical school, that to me has more value than jumping into university at 17, 18 years old, if it's a university of the world, and even if it's a Christian university. If they do not teach according to the principle, don't compromise. In the system known as Christian education, the division is about the same. The years of a student life extending perhaps to 30 instead of 24. With this division, the first 10 years are spent in the home school, from 10 to 15 in the church school, 15 to 20 in the industrial school, and the years from 20 to 25 or even 30 are devoted to study and active work in the training school of workers. The time now is when those who are true Protestants will demand Christian education, and when no sacrifice will be considered too great for the accomplishment of that object. The prophecy of Zechariah, recorded in the 9th chapter, gives the words of God concerning the contest to take place near the close of time between the sons of Greece and the sons of Zion. Turn you to the stronghold, ye prisoner of hope. Even today do I declare that I will render double unto thee. When I have been Judah for me, filled the bows with Ephraim, and raise up thy sons, O Zion, against thy sons, O Greece. So this is in the book of Zechariah where it's taught. This is the school of the world against the school of the heavenly places. Greece is recognized in scripture as emblematic of worldly wisdom, but by that wisdom the world knew not God. In fact, by that wisdom the world was led away from God. God will then raise up the sons of Zion. These are the 144,000 teachers, sons and daughters of Zion, the representative of his wisdom, the divine philosophy, against the sons of Greece, or the students of the wisdom of the world. Sometimes I'm afraid because I'm not able to supervise every schools right now that we are setting up. But I pray that with each other, we should ask maybe for somebody to go and inspect those schools, like just at the time of Elijah and Elisha, the school of the prophet of Samuel, to see if every teacher is really following the approach that 144,000 teacher is intending to apply. And if it was possible, then to help those teachers that are still going back to the ABC and the cramming and the memorizing, and this is not the true way of teaching. If you're doing that this way, like the good old days, the way you were taught, you're not teaching with the principle of true education. You better listen to this book or read it for yourself if you prefer, but you need to know true education. True education, the children do not need to learn the A, B, C, D, E, F. They will learn it as you teach them the spelling with the Bible readers. They will learn how to do mathematics with the mental arithmetics or other methods following the same using Bibles. And that's one thing I intend to do with mathematics. I want to do it based on the Bible. I'd like to do creation. I'd like to do the flood. I'd like to do all of the mathematical teaching in the Bible and prepare a digital book that will be totally from the Bible. And of course, using sciences with that as well. I think that will have a lot of value. Really a lot of value. So here we have the wisdom of Greece is a worldly wisdom. But because it does not know God and it even eliminates gods in the mind of the people, God will then raise up the sons of Zion, the representative of his wisdom, the divine philosophy, against the sons of Greece, or the student of the wisdom of the world. And in the final conflict, listen to this now, when truth wins, it will be evidence that those who are numbered with the victors have forsaken the wisdom of Greece for the wisdom of God. It is not theory, but the most solemn fact that the preparation for a life with God demand that we and our children receive a far different education that has been offered in the past. If we wish the highest culture, if we long for soul development, our education must be spiritual in nature. We must leave the low, turbid waters of the valley for the snow waters of Lebanon. This is Christian education. Protestants today see their children slipping from the fold. Every inducement in the way of entertainments, form, ceremony, and oratory is used to attract the youth to the church, but still the world allures them. Ministers are beginning to search for the reason and are attributing it to the character of the education now given in our schools. In saying this, they strike at the root of the trouble. Protestantism is dying. The form of godliness which denies the power thereof is spreading its dark mantle over the earth. Wow, what would he say in 2021? This was written in 1900, and he was able to declare that already. Protestantism is dying. I hope it's not dead. The form of godliness which denies the power thereof is spreading its dark mantle over the earth. It is in vain that we point to stately edifices or noted divines. If we cannot recognize the difficulties, it but proves that we are ourselves under the clouds, and recovery is all but impossible. So if the educators don't recognize what's happening today because of false education, well, we're in trouble. We talk of the spread of Christianity. We give of our means for the conversion of the heathen, while our children perish within our very homes. The spirit and power of Elijah, which was to accompany the preaching of the kingdom of Christ, was to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children. How are we going to do that? Through education. Christ the prophet Joel gathered the children and those that sucked the breast. Let the priest, the minister of the Lord, weep between the porch and the altar, and let them say, Spare thy people, O Lord, and give not thy heritage the children to reproach, that the heathen should rule over them. Ministers, fathers, mothers, look to the welfare of your children, or the cause of Protestantism is lost in America and everywhere. Take up your first, your all-important duty, and give your children a Christian education. And instead of a decline in church membership, as now reported, there will be an increase. Instead of formalism, there will be life. This will be the means of bringing the heathen to your door and to a knowledge of the gospel. Lift up thine eyes round about, and behold, all these gather themselves together and come to thee. As I live, says the Lord, thou shalt surely clothe thee with them all, as with an ornament, and bind them on thee as a bride doeth. For thy waste and thy desolate places, and the land of thy destruction, shall even now be too narrow by reason of the inhabitants. The children which thou shalt have after thou hast lost the other shall say again in thine ears, The place is too strait for me. Give place to me that I may dwell. Then shalt thou say in thine heart, Who hath begotten me these? Seeing I have lost my children and am desolate. Who has brought up these? Behold, I was left alone. These, where have they been? Where have they been? Thus says the Lord God, Behold, I will lift up my hands to the Gentile, and set up my standard to the people. And they shall bring thy sons in their arms, and thy daughters shall be carried upon their shoulders. And kings shall be thy nursing father, and their queens thy nursing mothers. They shall bow down to thee with their faces towards the earth, and lick up the dust of thy feet. For I will contend with him that contendeth with thee, and I will save thy children. This, where do they come, those children? Through education. How will he save the children? All thy children shall be taught of the Lord. There is the answer. True education will bring us the children from the Gentile, the orphans, the people that have never heard such a beautiful teaching will say, I want my children to be taught like this. When will the Gentile come bringing their children to supply the places of those now lost? When Protestants can show to the Gentile that they have a system of education which is free from the errors now so prevalent. When they can teach the Gentiles the truth. And then the end will come. Sing, O barren that did not bear. Break forth into singing and cry aloud, thou that did not travail with child. For more are the children of the desolate than the children of the married wife, said the Lord. Enlarge the place of thy tent. Let them stretch forth the curtains of thy habitation. Spare not. Lengthen thy cords and strengthen thy stake. For thou shalt break forth on the right hand and on the left, and thy seed shall inherit the Gentiles. The question come, when shall these things be? The same chapter of Isaiah answers, Let the word speak to you, when all thy children shall be taught of the Lord. When Protestants educate according to the principle of true Protestantism, then will the words of the same prophet recorded in the 60th chapter be fulfilled. Arise, be enlightened, for thy light cometh. The Gentiles shall come to thy light, and kings to the brightness of thy rising. Thy son shall come from far. Thy daughters shall be nursed at thy side. Christ came, fulfilling in every particular the prophecies quoted. As thou hast sent me into the world, even so I have also sent them into the world. are the words of Christ to his church? And this is a question, but it's also a statement. Just like Christ has sent us, just like his Father sent him and he has sent us, are the words of Christ to his church. They are. As Christ was a teacher, so that church which does the work which the Christian church must do will have a system of education, and its members will be educators indeed. I am persuaded that 144,000 teachers and generation 144K will finish, by the grace of God, the Reformation that started but did not finish, the Millerite that started but did not finish. I am persuaded of that. And that's why I believe in reproducing. That's why I believe in passing this knowledge to as many willing people as possible. If not, the stone will speak. Let us not put our Creator to shame. To shame. Of Christ as a teacher, it is written, he raised himself above all others, whom millions today regard as their grandest teachers. Buddha, Confucius, Mohammed, to say nothing of Greek and Roman sages, are not worthy to be compared with Christ. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! Jesus Christ, in founding a new religion, has laid the foundation of a new education in the bosom of humanity. And this, my friend, cannot be destroyed. That true education still exists. All what the Lord is looking for right now are the teachers. Go and teach. In lowliness and humility, write Dr. Schaff, in the form of a servant as to the flesh, yet effulgent with divine glory, the Savior came forth from a despised corner of the earth, destroyed the power of evil in our nature, realized in his spotless life and in his sufferings the highest idea of virtue and piety, lifted the world with his spear stand out of his distress, reconciled man to God, and gave a new direction to the whole current of history. It is the education which he taught, which was his very life, even in the courts of heaven, which Protestants are now entreated to accept. Today, if ye will hear his voice, harden not your hearts. Where are the Protestants who are true to the name? Where are the schools which will teach the things of God? Where are the teachers who forsake secular methods as did the reformers to become teachers for Christ? Earth with its inhabitants is to the heart of God the most precious part of the creation. As a recreant child draws harder on the parent's sympathy, so the world, because of the sinfulness of sin, has brought heaven and earth in touch. The universe sees, streaming from the throne, rays of light and love, pointing to the one spot in all creation where sin abounds. They tell the story of the cross, the perfect harmony which forms the music of the spheres, which was more when man fell, will again pervade all space when the plan of salvation is complete and our heart again joins in the great chorus of the Son of God. This is from the Spirit of Prophecy. It's so beautiful. The completion of the plans draw nigh, and for the final struggle, everything is now assuming an intensity never before seen. Principles of truth for centuries hidden or known only in part will again shine forth in their original splendor. The wisdom of the ages will be manifest in the closing era of the world history. True, this wisdom will often appear but foolishness in the eyes of those who oppose truth. But spiritual things are spiritually discerned, and the Spirit of the Holy One will once more brood over the whole earth, taking up its abode in those hearts which beat in unison with the strains of heaven. Christian education binds earth to heaven. The wise in art will return to the God-given system of education, choosing the fountains of living waters instead of hewing them out cisterns that can hold no water. And this is the end of this wonderful book. And I will leave you with those words as a prayer. The wisdom of the ages will be manifest in the closing era of the world history. And this wisdom though it appears foolishness in the eyes of those who oppose truth, but spiritual things are spiritually discerned, and the Spirit of the Holy One is brooding right now over the earth. He is over the earth. The Holy Spirit is here with us. And He will take up His abode in our hearts, because our hearts beat in unison with the strain of heaven. Thank you, Father. In our Savior's name we ask. Hallelujah.